Imagine a world where a princess, instead of happily ever after, decides to turn back just as she's about to sail away to her new life. This isn't a fairy tale. It's the real story of Princess Isabella, who, in the 14th century, chose to stay home rather than marry a prince in Bordeaux. Her decision shocked everyone, including her own father, King Edward III of England. But why did she do it? Was it because she was afraid, or did she have her own reasons? Let's dive into the fascinating and sometimes scandalous life of Princess Isabella. In the 14th century, royal marriages were more about politics and power than love. When Isabella was just a young girl, her father, King Edward III, decided to marry her to Bérard d'Albret, a French nobleman. This was a strategic move to strengthen ties between England and France, which were often at war. To get ready for the big day, 5 ships were ordered to carry Isabella and her retinue of knights and ladies to Bordeaux. The bride's trousseau was magnificent, with robes of cloth of gold, Tripoli silk, and a mantle of Indian silk lined in ermine and embroidered with intricate designs. Another robe of crimson velvet took 13 days to embroider, with 20 men and 9 women working tirelessly. Isabella also brought 119 chaplets, elaborate headdresses made of silk entwined with pearls and topped with a golden Agnus Dei, a symbol of Christ standing on a green velvet band adorned with flowers and leaves. These were not just pretty accessories. They were symbols of her wealth and status. But as the ships were about to set sail, Isabella had a change of heart. At the water's edge, she turned back and came home. No one knew why. Some said she wanted to jilt Bérard, as she had been jilted before. Others thought she was reluctant to assume a lower rank. Perhaps she remembered her sister, who had died on a similar voyage to Bordeaux. Or maybe the whole thing was a clever plan to acquire more revenues and a new wardrobe. Bérard d'Albret was so hurt by Isabella's decision that he supposedly renounced his inheritance and became a Franciscan friar, a poor and humble monk. However, other evidence suggests that he married a different woman, received territories from the King of France, and adopted a coat of arms with a strange symbol, the head of Midas supported by 2 lions. This seems to indicate that he was not as poor and humble as he claimed. Despite Isabella's waywardness, her father continued to shower her with gifts and endowments. He gave her fiefs, manors, castles, priories, and other valuable properties. Isabella, however, spent more than she received. She bought silver buckles on credit, let her servants' wages fall into arrears, and even pawned her jewelry. King Edward, being a doting father, always paid her debts. When Isabella turned 26, he assigned her a regular income of £1,000 a year, which he continued to pay until his death. 6 years later, Isabella was given the wardship of a rich miner, Edmund Mortimer, Earl of March. She promptly sold this wardship back to the Earl's mother for another £1,000 a year, with a strict condition. If the payments were late by even a single day, the penalty would be double the amount for that quarter. This shows that Isabella was not just a spendthrift, but also a shrewd businesswoman. Isabella's life as an independent woman in the royal court was anything but sheltered or innocent. The court was a place of amorous license, where ladies were not exactly known for their reticence. One of the most famous women of the court was Joan, the widowed Countess of Holland, known as the Fair Maid of Kent. She was described as the fairest lady in all the kingdom of England, and the most amorous. She wore daring and extravagant clothes, and her fashion choices were often copied by others. Tournaments, which were a popular form of entertainment, sometimes featured groups of ladies dressed in male attire, riding fine horses, and exhibiting a scurrilous wantonness that scandalized the crowd. These women were often described as the most costly and lovely, but not the best of the kingdom. They wore divided and party-colored tunics, short capes, and daggers in pouches, and their behavior was considered highly inappropriate. One of the most condemned practices among women was plucking their eyebrows and hairline to create a higher forehead. This was seen as a serious moral offense, and it was believed that demons in purgatory punished women for it by sticking hot needles into every hole from which a hair had been plucked. This seems extreme, but it reflects the intense scrutiny women faced for their appearance and behavior. The life of a 13th to 14th century lady was often satirized in literature. Jean de Meung, in his work Roman de la Rose, described the concerns of a lady in a way that seems all too familiar. A lady should wear a décolletage to show off her neck and bosom. use ointments to enhance her complexion, and take care not to talk too close to others if she has bad breath. She should laugh prettily, cry gracefully, eat and drink daintily, and avoid getting drunk or falling asleep at the table. She should attend church, weddings, and parties in her best clothes to gain renown, and she should be careful not to love a poor man or a stranger, unless they offer her money or jewels. While this is clearly a satire, it reveals a lot about the expectations and realities of women's lives at the time. Isabella, being a princess, had a retinue of goldsmiths, embroiderers, cutlers, and furriers always at her disposal. They were kept busy fulfilling her every need, from making jewelry to creating elaborate clothing. Despite her position and wealth, Isabella's love life remains a mystery. If she had any affairs, they did not reach the gossip columns, but given the court's environment, it's not hard to imagine. One famous example of a young noblewoman's affair is the story of Agnes of Navarre, who seduced the elderly and gouty poet Guillaume de Machaut. Agnes was only 17, and she insisted that Machaut publicize their affair in songs, poems, and a long, embarrassing verse narrative called Livre du Voir dit, True Tale. She gave him a golden key to her chastity belt and teased and kissed him, all the while regaling her young friends with stories of their affair. When Machaut later discovered that she was mocking him, he was heartbroken. The chastity belt, often mentioned in medieval literature, was believed to have been imported to Europe during the Crusades. However, there is very little non-literary evidence to support its widespread use. It was more likely a literary device than a common item. Medieval girls, like boys, became adults in their mid-teens and were often married at 14 or older. The highborn were sometimes betrothed in infancy or childhood, but the marriage was not consummated until the girl was older. Medieval life was far from private, and young girls, noble or otherwise, were likely to be aware of sexual matters. The Chevalier de la Tour Landry, a nobleman, wrote a book of moral tales for his daughters, which included stories of lechery, fornication, and rape. These tales were meant to teach his daughters about the dangers of the world, but they also reveal a lot about the realities of medieval life. Knights and ladies often stayed up late, singing, playing, and making noise, and it was not uncommon for men to make inappropriate advances toward women. When one knight was caught holding a lady's hand under her clothes, he had his arm broken by the angry husband. Entertainment in the castle was not limited to lofty epics of chivalry. Coarse and obscene stories, known as fablioques, were also popular. These stories often featured cuckoldry, where a wife tricks her husband or a lover is humiliated. Women in these tales were often portrayed as deceivers, but the fablioques were no more true to life than the chivalric romances. They reflected a common attitude toward women, which was heavily influenced by the church. The church saw women as the source of temptation and the obstacle to holiness. Preachers denounced women for their vanity, fashion, and over-industriousness. They traced original sin to the female, as it was Eve who tempted Adam to eat the forbidden fruit. This idea, formulated by St. Augustine, set the tone for Christian dogma, which often viewed sex as sinful. Despite this, the marital debt was considered mutual, and the sexuality of women was acknowledged, though it was always linked to the idea of procreation. The wife of Bath, a character from Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, is one of the most forthright celebrations of sex in medieval literature. She famously laments, "Alas, alas, that ever love was sin." But she herself does not seem to be troubled by this idea. Her tale is a powerful statement about the nature of marriage and the rights of women. Isabella's life, with its mix of luxury, scandal, and independence, reflects the complex and often contradictory world of the medieval court. She was a woman of her time, navigating the expectations and limitations placed on her by society, while also pursuing her own desires and interests. Whether she was motivated by love or material gain, her decisions and actions left a lasting impact on the history of her era. Her story is a reminder that even in a world dominated by men, women found ways to assert their agency and shape their own destinies.